There are moments in life when getting on your knees to pray feels impossible. When the weight on your chest is so heavy that even sitting up feels like lifting a mountain. You stare at the ceiling, eyes blurred with tears, whispering words that barely escape your lips. You feel guilty because you're not kneeling, ashamed because you're not strong, and you wonder if God can hear you when you're lying flat on your back. But the truth is, He can, and not only can He hear you, but He is closer in that posture than you might ever realize. Prayer was never about posture, it was about presence. It was never about proving your devotion through your position, but about pouring out your heart through your spirit. The moment you whisper His name, heaven bends down. The moment you breathe, God, help me. Even from a pillow soaked in tears, the Creator of the universe leans in and says, I'm here. When you pray lying down, you're not weak. You're surrendered. You've reached the point where pride, performance, and pretense are stripped away. There's no show, no audience, no image to maintain. It's just you and God. And in that stillness, something powerful begins to happen. God meets you not in your strength, but in your surrender. He doesn't wait for you to stand up. He steps into your brokenness, into your exhaustion, into your lying down prayers, and turns them into holy moments. Some of the greatest prayers ever prayed were whispered from beds of pain, hospital rooms, sleepless nights, and weary hearts. Because when you're lying down, your soul learns to listen differently. Your ears are not filled with the noise of busyness. Your eyes are not distracted by the chaos around you. You're still, and in that stillness God speaks. He speaks softly, often through the quiet whisper of peace that seeps into your spirit. He reminds you that His power is made perfect in your weakness. He tells you that the ground beneath you isn't defeat. It's holy ground. Because when you can't rise, He raises your spirit. When you can't move, His grace moves through you. When you can't speak much, your silence becomes a song that only heaven understands. Lying down prayers are the most honest kind. They are raw, they are unfiltered. You don't try to impress God, you simply invite Him. You don't dress up your words. You cry, you sigh, you whisper, you breathe. Sometimes you don't even have words. And yet, Romans 8:26 tells us that the Spirit Himself intercedes for us with groans that words cannot express. That means even when all you can do is lie there and feel the weight of the world, heaven translates your pain into a prayer. There's something sacred about that moment when your body gives up, but your spirit refuses to. It's when you realize prayer is not a ritual, it's a relationship. It's not about being physically upright. It's about being spiritually connected. You could be lying flat on your bed, your eyes closed, your energy gone, and yet be standing taller in faith than you ever have before. What happens when you pray lying down? God comes to your level. He meets you where you are. He sits beside your bed, listens to your trembling voice, and lays His peace over you like a blanket. The room may be dark, but His light begins to fill it. The air may be heavy, but His presence makes it holy. You start to realize that even this posture lying down can become an altar. Every tear that slides down your cheek becomes a drop of worship. Every breath that escapes your chest becomes an offering. Every heartbeat that still beats, even when broken, becomes a testimony that you're still here, still believing, still holding on to hope. And heaven notices. When you pray lying down, you are teaching your soul to trust even when your body can't move. You're saying, God, even here on this bed, in this weakness, in this stillness, I still believe you're in control. That's faith. Not faith that shouts from the mountaintop, but faith that whispers from the valley. Not faith that dances in celebration, but faith that clings to the last thread of hope and says, I'm not letting go. And do you know what's beautiful about that kind of faith? It attracts God's power. The same God who touched the sick, who raised the paralyzed, who healed the broken-hearted. He leans in when he hears that kind of prayer. Because when you are lying down in weakness, he sees a chance to show you his strength. When you are stretched thin by pain, he stretches his hand toward you. When your body rests, the position of your body in prayer may change. But the position of your heart before God is what moves heaven. You can kneel, you can stand, you can raise your hands, or even lie flat on your back in complete exhaustion. Yet what truly reaches the heart of God is not your posture, but your surrender. When life weighs you down so heavily that you cannot find the strength to kneel, even your silent whisper from the floor becomes a song in heaven if it's born from honesty and humility. God listens not to the elegance of your words or the perfection of your form, but to the truth that flows from within. Sometimes lying down in prayer isn't a sign of laziness or distance from God. It's the position of someone who's been fighting too long, carrying too much, and finally chooses to rest in divine presence. It's the posture of surrender, where the body gives up striving and the soul says, Lord, you take over. When your tears soak into the pillow, when words fail, and all you can do is breathe out his name, heaven hears that as clearly as a shout of faith. Because what moves God isn't motion, it's devotion. You see, God isn't impressed by our performance. He's moved by our posture of dependence. When you pray lying down, it can be one of the most honest forms of prayer you'll ever experience. There are no masks there, no rehearsed lines, no pretending to be strong. It's you, unfiltered and undone, reaching for the one who never slumbers nor sleeps. And in that stillness, where your body rests but your spirit rises, you begin to discover that the position of prayer that matters most isn't physical, it's spiritual. It's the place in your heart where you choose to believe that even from the lowest position, God can lift you higher than you've ever been before. Even when you're lying down, weak, weary, or broken, God still listens, and your surrender becomes the loudest form of worship. In those moments when your strength is gone, when your voice trembles and your body refuses to move, heaven doesn't turn away. In fact, that's when heaven leans in closer, because God is not waiting for perfect strength. He is drawn to perfect honesty. He listens to the quiet prayers that never make a sound, to the cries that stay locked inside your chest, and to the sighs that only the Holy Spirit can interpret. When you can't stand tall before the world, you can still lie down before your Creator, and that, my friend, is still worship. Your surrender in weakness is not a failure. It's faith in its purest form. When you lie there, completely spent, you're saying without words, God, I have nothing left but you. And that declaration shakes heaven more than any sermon or song. Because worship isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the silence of trust. It's the moment when your heart says, even here, even like this, I still believe. You see, God doesn't measure worship by volume or energy. He measures it by surrender. When you're lying down, your hands may not be lifted, but your heart can still rise. Your body may be still, but your spirit can still reach. Your lips may not move, but your tears can still speak. Every breath you take in the presence of God, every thought of dependence, every whispered help me, becomes an anthem of faith. And that anthem, though quiet to the world, roars in the courts of heaven. It's a mystery of grace. That even when you're too weak to move, you're never too weak to be loved. God meets you right where you are. In your bed, in your pain, in your silence. He takes your brokenness and calls it worship. He takes your stillness and calls it faith. Because in his eyes, surrender is not the end of strength. It's the beginning of transformation. And when you surrender fully, even while lying down, you are standing tall in the Spirit. When you pray lying down, you discover that God's strength begins exactly where your strength ends. It's in that moment when your body refuses to go on, when your mind is too tired to think and your heart feels too heavy to hope, that you come face to face with divine power. You see, God does his best work in the places where you have no strength left. When your will collapses, his grace stands tall. When your energy fades, his Spirit takes over. The moment you stop striving to hold everything together is the very moment God begins to rebuild what's been breaking inside you. Lying there, you realize that weakness isn't a punishment. It's an invitation. It's the sacred space where God says, "Now let me show you who I am." He doesn't need your perfection. He desires your dependence. You don't have to be standing strong for him to move. Sometimes you have to fall apart for him to step in. When your strength ends, his begins, and the very place where you feel empty becomes the place where heaven overflows. There's a deep beauty in that surrender when you stop performing for God and simply collapse into his presence. It's not a position of defeat. It's a posture of trust. You're saying, "Lord, I can't, but I know you can." And in that whisper of faith, power begins to move. You may not feel it right away, but something shifts. God begins to breathe into the very areas of your life that have run out of air. Think of it this way: when you've reached your limit, you've reached God's beginning. He waits for that moment when your hands fall empty so he can fill them, when your plans fall apart so he can replace them with his. Every time you reach the end of yourself, you're standing at the threshold of a miracle. That's the secret of praying while lying down. It's not about your weakness being exposed. It's about God's strength being revealed. Because when you finally stop trying to be strong, you make room for the one who never fails.